For decades, kids in the schoolyard would come to blows depending on whether or not their fathers were Holden men or Ford men. But now the Holden Commodore and Ford Falcon are gone, what's going to replace them? Well, the answer might surprise you. This is the Kia Stinger, and it's the spiritual successor to those two Aussie sedans. It's a rear-wheel drive V6 that gets a family of 5 around in comfort and style and is packed full of great technology. And it actually drives better than any Falcon or Commodore I ever got behind the wheel of. It feels more like a BMW or an Audi. But if there's one thing this car hasn't quite got me over the line with is its looks. Its front 3/4 angle is probably its best, but from behind, I don't know, it just looks a little bit sort of squashed and busy. And this area here on the back door with these squashed rear windows, I don't know, it just doesn't quite work for me. I think this car would actually look better as a 2-door coupe. The Genesis G70, which is a direct relative of this car, I think actually looks a bit better. The Stinger has a lot of vents on its body, and most of them are real, but the two most prominent ones that you see every time you get in the car are these two on the bonnet, and they most definitely are fake. But unlike Audi, who have a bit of form with fake exhausts, I'm pleased to report that all 4 of these are real. Now, I did want to show you under the hood of the Kia Stinger, but unfortunately there's something wrong with this car's bonnet release and it won't open, but you'll have to take my word for it. It's got a 3.3 litre twin-turbo V6 engine that outputs 274 kilowatts of power and a gut-kicking 510 Newton meters of torque. It's the same engine that you find in the Genesis G70, but that is a slightly smaller car and it's a little more nimble, so it does get along just slightly quicker. What I really do like though is these rear light clusters. I think they look really cool, and especially the red light that joins the two lights together. I love that. That's usually only something we see in high-end European cars. Practicality, of course, is a big thing for a family 4-door sedan, and the Stinger has a massive rear opening, being a sportback. The boot though isn't that large, it's only 406 litres. Drop the rear seats though, you get 1,114 litres of space. The interior is premium, and while it's probably not quite as rock solid as you see in some German cars, it is extremely well done, and I'm going to say it's probably better than the last of the Falcons or Commodores. The center console screen is a beautiful looking 10.25-inch unit with razor-sharp graphics. It runs the normal Hyundai Kia software, which is some of the best software there is in a car, so you're not going to go wrong with that. It also includes Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is not wireless, unfortunately, which is a bit strange because it is wireless in the Picanto, which only costs 1/3 of what this car does, but you can't have it all. Also with CarPlay, it doesn't use the full screen. It uses a cropped version. So where I usually say if you've got 10.25 inches, you might as well use it. Here, you can actually run 2 screens at the same time. So you can have CarPlay running on one part of the screen and then the native system running on the other, which is actually pretty cool. The big 3 air vents here in the middle of the console look fantastic. They kind of have a bit of a retro feel to them. I remember my dad's Ford Fairmont back in 1980 had big round ones too, and these look really good. In fact, they look very Mercedes-Benz, if I'm honest. Shortcut buttons and volume for the center console screen just underneath that. Climate controls underneath that, which are also mimicked up here on the center console screen. There's another little storage cubby down here, which has 2 USBs, one for the sound system, one just for charging, and a 12-volt outlet. Room to store your phone, but it doesn't quite fit, if I'm honest. The lower console is an interesting mix of sort of Audi and Jaguar, the bits of both of them here, with the Audi gear shifter and this row of buttons along the bottom here, very Jaguar-like. There's also a lot of fingerprint generating piano black plastic here, which I would feel the need to keep quite clean. A good sized centre bin here with a nice little removable tray that always seems to fall out of its slot and stops the armrest from closing properly, a little bit annoying. A hybrid digital analog instrument cluster here, which actually is quite usable. It has some really good displays on here. I feel that the gauges showing you the engine torque, temperature and turbo boost are a little bit computer game-like. They look like something that you'd see on the bottom of a car racing game on your Xbox rather than something that actually belongs in an actual car. It'd be nice if this screen was just a little bit bigger. It's just a little bit too small, perhaps. In fact, it'd be better if it was an all-digital instrument cluster, but Kia don't really seem to be doing a lot of those. The steering wheel feels great in the hand. It's covered in faux leather and has some nice stitching on it. The GT model gets a flat bottom and genuine leather. Speaking of fake leather, that's what the seats are covered in, and this would actually have to be about the best fake leather I've seen. It is extremely soft and very, very comfortable. It's very armchair-like. It's nice and low in the cabin. I've got plenty of headroom. I've almost got my legs stretched out straight here at the moment. Visibility out the front is fantastic. Looking back though, not so good. The blind spots are pretty blind because of those high rear door sills, and also there's no blind spot monitoring in this car. The rear windscreen is also at a very shallow angle with this car being a Sportback, so you can't see all that much out of that either. Checking out the back seat of the Stinger, and look, this is a 4-door sedan slash Sportback, so there is actually pretty good accommodation for backseat passengers here. Now look, it's not going to be often that I'm going to be seating behind my own seating position in a car like this, and I'm 190 centimeters tall, so considering that, it's actually pretty good. My knees not quite touching the seat in front of me, but there's not an awful lot of toe room, not much headroom either with that sloping roofline. We do have a couple of air vents though, a USB charger and a 12-volt outlet. Does anybody actually use those for anything anymore? And an armrest with 2 cup holders, and there's one for each passenger in the door as well. So actually this is pretty comfortable. So it's really not an exaggeration to say that the Stinger aims for, and for the most part achieves, a European level of refinement and smoothness. It is an extremely quiet car to drive, which actually is almost a bit of a shame because the noise from the V6 is actually really nice to hear. There's 5 different driving modes all up. They are Smart, Eco, Comfort, Sport and Custom. And to be honest, there's not really a huge difference between them other than acceleration perhaps. It's certainly a bit dead in Eco mode, and in Sport mode around town in bumper-to-bumper traffic, it's actually just a little bit too eager on acceleration. You know, you kind of can accidentally lurch forward a bit too quickly. So probably best to stick with Comfort or Smart around town. Another thing just to be careful of in this car, which I found out and gave me quite a scare the other day, is the emergency braking system, where the car will detect if a car in front of you is stopped, and if you're not braking, it will slam the brakes on for you, which in theory is a great system. But on the weekend I was driving along, going through an intersection, when suddenly the car just braked without any warning whatsoever, and it scared the life out of me. There was nothing in front of me. I don't know what triggered it, but it's not a perfect system. The Stinger has all the usual autonomous driving features that you see, lane keep assist, adaptive cruise control, but I do find that those systems perhaps don't work quite as well on this car as they do in others, particularly other European cars, in that the car kind of wanders around the lane a little bit if it's left to its own devices, and the adaptive cruise control is fine on the freeway, but if you're using it in bumper-to-bumper traffic in the city, it won't actually start the car again once you've stopped it. You have to put your foot on the accelerator to get it going again, which kind of defeats the purpose of having it. So probably leave the adaptive cruise control for the freeway. 0 to 100 in the Kia Stinger V6 330S is 4.9 seconds, which looks and sounds a little bit like this. Sorry, too many G-forces. But that was fun. Felt the rear end just getting a little bit happy there as we took off. I still felt like I was in control, it was all good. So 0 to 100 in 4.9 seconds. That's only 0.2 slower than an Audi S5 Sportback. So, and that car costs about double what this one does. So you have to ask yourself the question, is 0.2 of a second worth an extra 60 grand? I don't know. We've got a couple of paddles behind the steering wheel here so you can change gears manually. They work very well. I haven't needed to use them. Good to know they're there though. In as many ways that the G70 and the Stinger are the same, they're also extremely different, and little things like interior design and, well, exterior design are quite different between the two cars, even though they share the same engine. But the Stinger, just being that much larger, does drive quite differently to the G70, where the G70, I think, can feel like a smaller car. You definitely feel the Stinger's size. It definitely feels like a large sedan. And it's just not quite as dynamic on bendy roads as the G70. On corners, the steering just could do with a little bit more feel. I'm in sport mode at the moment and it just feels a little bit lifeless. All of which is fine when you're on the freeway, but I think this is where hot hatches have it over sports sedans. Starting at around 50 grand and $59,000 for the 330S model seen here, the Kia Stinger has German levels of refinement and performance at a far more affordable price. I don't think it's really a replacement for the Holden Commodore or Ford Falcon because, to be honest, I think it's much better than either of those. But if you hanker after a fast European sedan and your budget doesn't quite stretch that far, then the Kia Stinger is a more than capable substitute.